Welcome to another episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. And as always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, for their continued support. This week in Top Lines and Tails, I've actually got a live broadcast because I'm in the farmhouse at Balboosie with John Cameron, a well-known farmer, landowner and railway enthusiast of all things. And not many people have their own Wikipedia page, John, but you do. That's made my job a little bit easier for research. So thanks very much for taking the time to speak to him.
Not at all, my pleasure.
And John, you breed Herefords. A lot of people will know that you breed and have bred Hereford cattle for some time, but going back the way at one time, you were credited as being the largest sheep farmer in Europe. Would that be right? Running a lot of acres and a lot of sheep.
Well, whether it was right or not, I don't know, but let me tell you, the origin of that is at the time I was chairman of the European Sheep Meat Committee in Brussels, and a number of the committees were getting new computers at that time, and my secretary of the Sheep Meat Committee was one of those who wanted his own computer. So after a bit of negotiating with them, I decided that yes, I would apply to the financial division of the EEC to get a computer for the sheep sector, and he was very grateful. But 2 or 3 weeks after that, I was in Brussels for the monthly meeting, and he said, Mr. Cameron, he said, the new computer is marvellous. He said, you know, we were listening to it last night, and apparently this new computer gives a number of sheep on every holding in Europe.
Okay.
And he said, we looked up your farm, and he said, do you know something? And I said, no. And he said, you are the largest flock master in Europe.
Wow.
And I thought, now how can I match that? So eventually I said, did your wretched computer also tell you that I have the biggest overdraft in Europe? So he laughed.
How many sheep would you be running back then, John?
At that time we were running hill ewes, mind you, but 10,000 black-faced ewes on three hill places.
And where were they?
The place we had for a long time, Glenfinlas in West Perthshire, and then Glenlochy, also in West Perthshire, and then my father's farm up at Spean Bridge near Fort William.
Okay, up there as well. So, and that would be the farms would have been in the family for a few generations.
The farms were well. Glenlochy was one that I bought during my time, as it were. Glenfinlas was part of the family farm, as was Glengloy.
I mean, I'd seen figures that it was something like 37,000 acres, but I mean, some of those hills are huge.
I couldn't tell you without sitting down and working it out. But just let me say that the great thing to me about the 10,000 ewes is that they were all hill ewes, and they were all eligible at that time for the hill ewe subsidy.
Of course, so you'd be getting one of the biggest checks out of Europe as well.
That was a cheque that I didn't hesitate to take to the bank.
Indeed, and you'd run a lot of shepherds on hills, so there'd be one shepherd per hill going back to the way. We used to
have. Well, it turned out at one time when you know the sort of intensity was at its greatest. We had one shepherd for every 1,000 ewes.
Did you? Okay, right. And shepherding two dogs.
But the other thing that helped with the sheep sector was that we brought all the lambs down to the arable farms in Fife to finish. So, I mean, not only were we maintaining the hill flocks, but we were finishing the lambs as well.
Which is why you had so many sheep, of course.
Well...
and these black ewes, of course, would be hefted up there for generations and generations.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right.
No, incredible beast a hill sheep is, isn't it? And so... It seemed to. I remember reading your father was in the war, and then you sort of took over the farming side yourself.
Yes, well, during the war, father was in the wartime agricultural executive committee, so mother was running the farms. At that time, there was her folks' farm here at Balboosie, and the hill farm of Glenfinlas. So mother was running them during the war, while father was in Edinburgh every day during the week. And at the end of the war, father, of course, gave up the position in the wartime executive committee, and came back. And my mother's parents were retiring at that time, from Balboothie, so we settled at Balboothie.
Okay.
And I've been here ever since.
You have, okay, yeah. Now, well, if Balboothie, I mean, we see, it's a dull day today, but you can just about see the sea across there and some fantastic flat land here.
Yeah, we can both see the sea and hear the sea on a quiet day. And we have a good look across to East Lothian, and it's a nice spot to be, I have to say.
You're in amongst Balcaski around here as well. The Toby Amstruther would own a lot of ground around you, I guess, and they're a fairly big estate.
Well, we sort of we're not fancy farming at all, but there's a number of well-known farms in Fife.
Yeah. No, I first came here, I think in the early 90s, you had a Scotch sheep event here. Was it Scotch sheep or Scotch beef? You certainly had one event here on the farm. I didn't know where I was coming to. I'd never been to Fife before.
We had a Scotch beef event on a number of occasions.
Okay.
And then the National Beef Association had their open beef day here on a number of occasions as well. It was I always quite enjoyed these open days because it made sure that the men got the farm all tidied up.
I've heard a few people say that in one or two places when that comes in. But I think it was a Scotch sheep that I came to, and I remember it being a lot of trade stands and around.
Yes, a Scotch sheep was here too. That's right.
Yeah, and you mentioned the National Sheep Association. We'll go on to maybe some of the posts that you have held in the industry in a bit, but you certainly were chairman of the National Sheep Association and the National Cattle Association as well, I think, in various times.
Yes, for my sins. That's all a long time ago, though, and I'm now trying to get out of some of these positions. Just let me say, it's a damn sight easier to get into something than it is to get out of it.
Oh, if you do the job right, they'll keep you coming back, that's for sure. That's for sure. And but this is a livestock podcast, so I'd like to talk a little bit about your Hereford cattle. And I think your wife maybe that got you into the Hereford cattle.
Yes, Margaret's originally from South Africa, and of course Hereford, the predominant breed out there. And we were almost. I was reached a stage where I knew I would have to sort of, if you like, modernise our cows, modernise the beef herd. And so I took the opportunity of also sort of looking carefully at the sires that we're going to use. And I decided that the Hereford, for again, like the sheep, we were finishing all our own cattle. And I decided that the Hereford was worth an investment. Okay. And Margaret, my wife, was very keen on, she wanted something sort of special to do on the farm, so I said, right, you could look after the pedigree Hereford herd.
There you go. Okay.
And of course we used all the bulls, we used them ourselves on our own commercial cows.
That's right, and I know you ran a lot of cows, maybe speak about those in a second, but the Herefords, you went into Herefords maybe at a time when Herefords went at their very best. They certainly went at their heights. They'd gone small and then trying to get them big again. It was an awkward time for them. I mean, I'm from Herefordshire originally, down that way, and then they went through a big change.
Well, I mean, almost a bit. It almost depends on what you're going to a breed for. What's your objective? What you want to get out of it. And the Hereford, I mean, irrespective of big or small or whatever, but it was giving us the type of female that we wanted to run on our sort of grassland farms.
Okay.
So and Margaret got the showing bug, as it were. So we had a sort of an inner circle of Herefords that we kept for showing.
Yeah.
And
I certainly remember you turning up at all the shows, and I think I used to sell grooming equipment, and you bought some from me in the past. I know.
I could tell you something. When Margaret decided or thought that she'd like to get into showing, I thought, this could be expensive. And then I thought to myself, but not as expensive as the shops in Princess Street. So Margaret's had her own herd ever since then.
Under the Baldini prefix, which I think is Baldini in Ely.
Baldini was the name of my mother's house in Ely.
All right, there we go. And I'm going to mention a name, Sandy Campbell from Canella, of course, well known for shorthorns, but I think he was a friend of yours and helped you get there.
Sandy was a shorthorn, but Sandy went into Hereford.
Okay.
And he was the driver, as far as I was concerned, or the enthusiast about us moving into Herefords as our sort of base herd for all our own breeding, and encouraged Margaret to show. I learned a lot from Sandy Campbell.
Yeah, and you would have gone to Canada. Would you started with cattle from Canada?
We did. Sandy and I went to Canada to look at a lot of tremendous Hereford cattle out there.
Okay. Different type of cattle there than they were here. You'd be looking for that size, and obviously the poll as well.
Well,
bit more
depend. I mean, there was a difference. There were a whole range of Herefords in Canada, depending where they were.
Okay.
I mean, there was the lush grassland states ranging to the prairies.
Yes.
And the cattle, were different accordingly.
And you buy them. You're going to see them in the shows as well. And those boys are a bit smarter bringing the cattle out at the shows over there.
We brought one or two over. We did, yes. And the ones we brought over were sort of some of our better cattle.
Yeah. Okay. And you have a few families. I know Hereford. It's a bit like the Angus are bred in families. But there was a Baldini Cathy. I think she was a show cow, wasn't she?
As I say, Baldini was the name of my mother's house when they retired to Ely. But yes, Cathy was one of the better ones we had, and we showed her quite a bit, and she did us fine.
Did she not win the Burke Trophy at the Royal, if I believe?
She did, yes. She did.
Not many people can claim that one anyway, and there wouldn't be too many Herefords that will have won that in the last decade or two.
No,
anyway.
That might be. The Herefords have been in a slow decline since then. Mm-hmm. But, they still suit our purpose. Otherwise, if they hadn't, I wouldn't have hesitated to change. But there's no point in making change for change's sake. No. And the Herefords are doing our job now, so we'll continue.
Well, the Herefords are getting, the native breeds generally, the short ones, the Angus Herefords, they're coming back into fashion, and there's more demand for the meat as well.
I mean, breeds come and go, and you have to expect that. But some of the native breeds now that were down a bit 10 years ago have come back to the fore. Yeah, and to me that's a good thing.
And they're competing on weight as well nowadays as well, getting them sort of heavier.
Yeah, well, the demand for the really heavy carcass has gone.
Yes.
And so you have to. But I mean, apart from adjusting your breed, you have to adjust your system as well when changes like that take place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I walked in through the farmyard and I saw a lot of Herefords there. How many pure Herefords are you running now?
Well, we're down now. You'll know that 2 or 3 years ago I wound the farming system down. I thought, I had plenty of other interests, and I thought, well, I'm not going to leave everything till the last minute, as it were. So we started to wind down. So we're just left with Bob Boothie now. I sold the 3 hill places, and of course the sheep went with them, and they went 2 grassland places that were all cattle, so I sold them as well. So we're now down that we have about 30 pure Herefords. Well, Margaret has 30 pure Herefords, and we just keep our interest in the breed and show. We show at not nearly so many shows now, but we still show 2 or 3 shows. Okay. And just, as I say, to keep our interest.
And you turn bulls out to Stirling as well. I've seen you there bringing bulls out to the bull sale. So you're still selling a few bulls away to.
Well, we don't have the home demand now. We don't have our own cows to use them on. Mm-hmm. So if we have, I think, 1 or 2 bulls that are fit for purpose, then yes, we'll keep them and sell them. We actually sell most of them privately, but occasionally, as you say, we take them to the bull sales.
No, they are certainly more in demand and getting a bit of price about, certainly for the best ones. And the classes at the shows now are a lot bigger than they used to be at one time. You could go there were 2 or 3. Now some of the bigger numbers.
Changes come and go. Mm-hmm, yeah. And the important thing is to move with the times.
Yes, sure. And you mentioned the commercial cows. I think you were running 800 cows. I read somewhere.
We had 800 cows at one time, but that was great interest because. You had to decide which bull you were going to put with which lot of cows, on which farm and why, and in particular, pay particular attention to the herds that you were expecting to get replacements from. Sure. Because of course that's critical for the future of any herd, the replacement heifers that you're putting into the herd.
And it was the ling, you had a lot of lings, you'd be one of the early ones in the
lings. Well, our basic cow in that 800 cows that we had was the Simling, the Ling cow crossed with a Simmental bull. Mm-hmm. And as I say, I'm not saying that that's everybody's dream, but it suited us. Quite the bulk of these cows were outwintered. Mm-hmm. Not them all, but the bulk of them were outwintered. And that Simling breed was hardy enough to stand rigours of a hard winter, and yet it was still. one thing that I liked, well, I always insisted on, was that the animals, the cows in particular, were if you like, of a friendly nature. We would never keep a heifer, for example, if we thought it was going to be wild or had wild tendencies. Sure. But and these Simlings were very canny cattle. I had an old saying. I used to like looking at my cattle, not looking for them.
I like that expression. And you'd run those. The lings would be running up on the hill, maybe not as high as the sheep, but they would run a hill and
the ling cattle. That was part of their fortitude, of course, that the lings could run out with the hill sheep. But we would bring them in, sort of into hill parks, and give them a bite of silage usually, and again, just depending on their condition, you had to look after them.
And of course,
any other stock.
The Simmental, of course, people don't realise is an alpine breed, and they come from high up on the mountains themselves. Good milkers, good milkers too.
Simmentals, the ling had the sort of hardy element that we were looking for, and were also docile. The Simmentals had the ability to milk in these conditions. And again, they were, by and large, they were very quiet to work with.
Good. And the lings now, again, another breed, are making a resurgence. They're making big numbers as well. And some
lings are coming on. I'm delighted to see that.
Yeah, some great. And because
in a sense, ling cattle did a lot for the social economy of the difficult areas, which might not have followed from other breeds.
Sure. And the ling, of course, bred back from a Highlander originally, but a Highlander and a Shorthorn there as well. And we just talk about, you mentioned finishing the cattle. The beef side of it is probably another reason, maybe, when you're in Hereford. So the Waitrose got an interest in buying Hereford beef.
We had a deal with Waitrose, that we had a fixed price for the season, fixed price for steers, a fixed price for heifers, and then latterly I think we had a fixed price for all the finished cattle, but we had to guarantee that we would supply them with 400 head a year, a season, and in return they gave us a guaranteed price.
Okay, and were they sourcing those cattle for Scotland? I know Waitrose got into that, and that schemes ran in different parts. You were involved in that, I think, weren't you?
Waitrose had a lot of markets. I remember the cattle that we had mostly went to Dovecote Park in Yorkshire. Yes. So I imagine from there they would go all over the south.
Sure. No, certainly a great thing. And still going on, I think. Waitrose still certainly down in the south.
Oh, Waitrose are still on the go, yes, indeed.
But they're still providing Hereford beef, and pure Hereford beef as well now, I think, if they can get it as well. So there's obviously a good outlet for that's maybe one of the reasons why the Hereford is making a resurgence, if they can find a market for and a supply.
Yeah, I mean, all breeds are capable of a resurgence, provided the breeders put their shoulder to the wheel.
Sure. No, brilliant. Let's go on to a few other appointments. You ended up being president of the NFU, which is a thankless task, I'm pretty sure, but yes. One that you were renowned to do fairly well. I don't think you take much crap off anybody, if that's probably the right expression.
I mean, I enjoyed my time. I was we were making a change in principle up here over to a longer term president, and for my sins, I was the first long-term president that Scotland had had.
How long did you do?
I think I did 7 years.
Did you? Okay.
But I mean, at that time, well, let's say we didn't have the problems that we're having now.
I'm sure you had your share back then, though.
We had our share, but I mean, and I suspect that governments, I'm not making any political point, but governments in general were perhaps more friendly disposed towards agriculture in those days than they are now.
I'm going to say
which of course made NFU president's job a lot easier.
I was going to say you can carry on that front if you want. What do you make of the political setup of the agriculture just now in Scotland?
Well,
changes needed.
I'm sort of saying nothing but watching. Okay. And I still go to Scotland House and so do a bit with the officials there.
Do you? And, so you better not incriminate yourself too much. And if you're still involved, and as I said, I mean you're in your 80s now, but you are still involved in quite a lot of things.
Yes, for my sins, as I said to you, it's not so easy to get out of things. But I still do a bit of work on the railway front as well. And
let's get on to the railways. In why railways would be my first question. I mean, but a railway enthusiast, I said you were, but you're more than that.
I suppose that, like every youngster, I had an interest in railways. The difference was the others lost their interest once once they grew up a bit, I never lost the interest. And in due course, I had the opportunity. It was a government appointment to become chairman of ScotRail.
Yes, I knew that. Yeah.
And I thoroughly enjoyed that. I did that for 7 or 8 years as well.
Were you chairman of ScotRail? Were you not chairman of British Rail as well, or British National?
No. The contact that I had with British Rail was that the chairman of ScotRail, the Scottish region, was, and I think it was the only region that had this as of right, but the chairman of ScotRail was automatically a member of the British Railways Board.
Oh, that's how it works.
So I used to, obviously attend British Rail Board meetings as well.
Okay. But the history with the trains was something just yourself. It was just a passion that you got. It's not like it came through the family.
It didn't come through the family. No, I have to say it was to me it was something. It was different. It was different to farming, but it involved contact with a whole lot of men and largely depended, as agriculture does, on the goodwill between employers and employees. And
difficult times. Obviously, Beeching had closed all the railways. I suppose by the time you got involved in it, what was that? The middle 60s when they shut one of those lines?
Beeching was doing his closing. He had done some of it, but since then I've been involved in a number of reopenings. Okay. Which has been quite interesting. Putting together, almost trying to dismantle the case that Beeching had made to close them and put forward a better case under different circumstances to reopen them.
So it's been nice to have the train line back into here, because it used to run right into Crail.
It was going around the full circle.
Yeah, yes, it was.
But, and I also, I got on, what I did, I've always been a sort of practical fellow, and I have 2 locomotives of my own, as you know. But when I was on the board in London, I became chairman of the safety committee. Okay. And the chief executive was a bit concerned that he knew that I was driving locomotives from time to time. And he said, look, as chairman of the safety committee, you can't continue, which I must admit I saw the sense of. So I went to chairman of the board, Bob Reid, who was a personal friend as well as being chairman of the board. I said, Bob, if I were to get passed out like any of the drivers, I said, would I be able to continue with my driving? Because I said, that's where I get my enjoyment in the railway world. And I wondered what he would say to that request. And to my great relief, he said, John, he said, it would be great to have somebody on the board who could drive.
Could drive a train.
And so after that, but the point I want to make is that almost my sort of relationship with the rest of the men, with my fellow workers on the railway board, improved out of all recognition.
I can imagine it would.
I'd be going through Waterloo or King's Cross, not home depots. I'd be going through depots and drivers would say, hello, Governor.
Really?
And I had no idea who they were. But it made a difference.
My brother-in-law was a train driver, and yes, you're right. I think they can be a tricky lot as well, some of the train drivers, but if you're one of them, then...
If you're one of them. And also, a difference it made between myself and our contact with the railway unions. Yes. Again, the fact that I was a driver.
That's exactly what I meant.
Went down well with them.
Exactly what I meant. And you said about your own train, but you actually drove a train. You still have a train driver's license, have they still let you keep your train?
Yes, no, I still have my driver's ticket, we call it.
Okay.
Which you have to have now. When you get to my age, you have to have medical every 2 years, and I don't know how long I'm going to be able to pass that.
Well, that involves not falling out of trees.
Fingers crossed. But one of my, if you like, just one of my highlights on the railways front was, of course, when we reopened the border line to Tweed Bank. Our guest of the day was the Queen, of course, late Queen, and one of my locomotives, the Union of South Africa, was selected to haul the Royal Train that day, and so of course you can imagine who was driving.
You got the job of driving the Queen. Now I did hear that. What a fabulous thing to have done!
Oh yes. And, I used to enjoy going out.
Did she have an interest in the trains herself, the Queen? In the Royal Train, did she come and have a look at the engine?
Yes, that was one of the things that I appreciate about the Royal Family. Yeah. The Queen and the Duke in particular always wanted to have a word with the driver at the end, and
Excellent.
I used to sometimes go back because as chairman of ScotRail, we used to have to always travel when the Royal Train was out, travel with it. Mm-hmm. But and there's been one or two, let's say, quite famous people had a run on the locomotive.
Really? And is it your locomotives are steam? Both the two engines you have are both
the two locomotives that I have, that actually on the farm here, because I'm going to open a museum is too grand a word, but I'm going to open to the public to come and look at the two locomotives and one or two other bits and pieces of railway.
You're putting in, I think, a bit more than that. You're putting in a sort of cafeteria area.
Oh yes, the reason we're doing that is perhaps not entirely aligned to railways, but I'm planning to make Balbuthy into an open farm.
Okay.
Where, because I've often felt that when I was president of NFU, I didn't really do enough to try and forge this vital link between producers and consumers.
Absolutely.
And that's what I'm going to try and do now. We'll have the farm open, anyone can come in. I'll get some knowledgeable person from the college, for example, to come and speak a bit, and then we'll take the people round. And this is where I mean forging the link between consumer and producer to everybody's advantage. They'll have a look at what they see and then come back in and discuss the day. And there's where I think the value of the exercise will be.
Absolutely, and I've had quite a few people on the podcast, and they say us as farmers we have a responsibility to keep that link and to forge that
absolutely,
so they do know where the food's coming from.
And we're not all bad guys. A lot of support for that. I just need to get round to getting it into operation now, but it's fairly close.
And you have the train. I seem to remember reading somewhere you had a little bit of a run-in with Fife Council. I've had a run-in with Fife Council, not the easiest people to deal with. But
well, the building in which I have the two locomotives was originally a farm building, and the designation of when it was built was it was for agricultural purposes. And of course, I knew fine that I wouldn't be able to put the two locomotives in without getting a change of use from Fife Council. And the first time round they refused it. And that would have been so bad, but it took so long to organise an appeal, and the next time, believe it or not, my appeal went through like that.
I believe your train shed has got underfloor heating. Is that right? Did I read somewhere?
There was underfloor heating in the shed.
Yeah.
In any case, so we've left it so that winter time we can put it on at a low level.
Okay, brilliant.
Keep the locomotives, because locomotives, like any other valuable piece of machinery, got to be looked after.
Sure, valuable, I'm sure they are. And you ran a line here for a while. I was talking to somebody playing golf the other day, and they said, "Did you know that John Cameron had his own railway line?"
One of the cattle farms, from the grassland farms, it actually had the last 3 miles of the old East Fife Central Railway.
Okay.
When I bought it, and when I bought number 9, that's the big locomotive, the A4. It still had quite a lot of life left. Quite a lot of his ticket was still valid.
Okay.
And so I was looking somewhere. I thought, it's a pity a valid locomotive with a valid ticket to be parked up somewhere. So I just thought, well, we've got this old, and the important thing was British Rail were closing it at the time. It was a beaching cut.
Okay.
They were closing at the time. So I went along and said, look, that 3 miles of track that lies within my ground. I knew that Railway had to offer it to the landowner first. So I bought the ground, and then I remember going to the engineer who was lifting the track. I said, when you come to the last 3 miles, I said, how about just leaving the track down? Because I said, I'm thinking of buying it, you see. And his reply was, oh, well, Mr. Cameron, he said, if you buy it, he said, that'll save us lifting it.
Well, there you go.
So anyway, that's how we came to have the lofty railway, which shortly after I'd bought number 9, there was a ban on steam on the main lines, which lasted for about 7 years. So for those 7 years, at weekends only, we ran number 9 up this track.
Was there a station on there as well? Did people come in and get on?
Yeah, we went a couple of coaches.
Yeah.
And we used to take on passengers on weekends.
How wonderful.
Mostly in summertime, but we opened during the winter as well.
How wonderful. And you say about number 9, how old are your 2 engines? How old are the engines?
How old is it?
When were they made?
I think number 9 was built about 37 or 38.
Okay. Right.
And but it's the 2 locomotives that have the great thing about them, as far as I'm concerned, they're both Scottish engines. They've only ever been at 2 depots each in their lives.
Right.
Both were Scottish depots. The big locomotive which ran the East Coast Main Line was at Haymarket in Edinburgh.
Okay.
It was a Haymarket engine. And then when the diesels took over the East Coast Main Line, it went to Aberdeen, Ferryhill Depot in Aberdeen. So it was always been a Scottish engine. And the other one, the Great Marquis. Great Marquis, interestingly enough now, there's only 5 of that class ever built, specifically to haul the fish traffic from Mallig down to Glasgow, because the West Highland was a very steeply graded line and the big locomotives couldn't go up there. So 5 of these locomotives were built to haul the fish traffic down to Glasgow, where a big locomotive took it onto the fish market in London.
Because that's the one, the Flying Scotland runs that line now, doesn't she? Because I've been up there.
It's been up there now, but it's different putting a locomotive up on a one-off occasion and putting it up, every day.
Sure. And go on to a few other appointments. I know you were chairman of Dollar Academy, and you do a lot for youngsters and people. Generally, you've got a trust, I believe.
You've done your homework. I was chairman of Dollar for quite a long number of years. A bit goes back to what I say. It's easier to get into something than it is to get out of.
You got to stop putting your hand up.
I thoroughly again, I enjoyed that. It was different to farming, different to railways. And it gave me a chance. Dollar was my old school,
of course, yeah.
So I had an interest from way back. And not that I excelled as a pupil, let me tell you, but I always thought, if I was going to do anything to help the younger generation, it could be done through Dollar.
Yeah, no, that's an exceptional thing.
The school just now are building a new building, quite a substantial exercise. So, and I have a trust now for young people to travel, and in particular, quite a number of young people from Dollar.
Okay, so they'll apply.
So I've kept my contact.
Sure. But it is difficult. We're going completely off subject, but it doesn't matter. It is difficult for these private schools now. I've had 2 boys. Both my boys had one at Gordonstown, and both for these schools to stay going in this time, and obviously a lot of overseas pupils and what have you. But it's very hard for them to keep going, isn't it?
Well, and the other thing that I've had the benefit of all my farming life is that I've taken students.
Okay.
Doing courses at college and so on. And I suppose over the years, we'll have had 60, 70 students.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
And I still say when I'm asked about my students that I learn more from my students than they learn from me.
Might teach you how to use the computer anyway, but yes, no, brilliant thing. But I know you are, say, with your travel trust, sending students all around the world, a bit like Nuffield, I suppose, a similar thing.
Well, we do that. The travel trust does that. They've got to have a reason for going where they're going.
A bit like Nuffield, yeah.
But if we judge it a valid reason, then we don't query where they're going.
Okay, excellent.
I enjoyed travelling myself, actually, and one of my, if you like, one of the things proud's not the right word, but one of the things that pleases me is that I've been to both poles. I've been to the North Pole and the South Pole.
You never cease to amaze me. Really, that's unbelievable. There are not many people in the world that have ever done both.
Well.
Excellent. And you travel. I know I've just been to, we've just taken a trip to Argentina, and I was talking to Fletch, because Ken Fletch came with me, and Fletcher, he said, I saw John Cameron one day in the airport, and he said, you've just come back from Argentina.
Yes. Funny enough, I've got 3 cousins farming in the Argentine.
We know one of them is one of my listeners up to the
podcast. Father went out to the Argentine for 10, 12 years as well.
Okay.
So, the family have quite a strong connection with the Argentine.
One of them writes a bit, I think he might be Alan Cameron, if I'm right.
Alan Cameron, yes, right. Alan's a cousin.
Yeah, there you go. Is David Cameron any relation to yours, by the way, the Prime Minister?
No, I don't claim that.
Don't claim that one, no, just as well. And you've been on the board of various things, and Stagecoach was another one. I think you were in the early days of Stagecoach when they...
Yes, I was on the board of Stagecoach, Stagecoach Rail, for a number of years.
Okay, not the bus side of it, no?
Again, no, not the bus side.
Okay.
Although obviously you couldn't be involved in Stagecoach Rail without getting involved with the buses from time to time.
Sure.
But again, it was interesting to see how a modern entrepreneur in the form of Brian Sutter ran railways, which was new to him when he took over. And Stagecoach had about 3 or 4 of the railway franchises.
Okay.
So I got a lot of experience.
I believe we're going to get an electric bus going from here to Edinburgh. That's the latest thing. A driverless bus is going to be taking us.
I don't know about the driverless bus.
Apparently so.
But we are about to open in June, if all goes well, open the new line from Leavenmouth to Thornton Junction.
Okay.
And that'll give the people of Leavenmouth, Methil, Buckhaven, all that. All that sort of basis, that'll give them access to rail direct service to Edinburgh.
Okay, and they've opened a new station just this back this side of Leven as well, haven't they, just recently?
Yeah, they've just opened a new station in London at Cameron Bridge, actually.
That's right, yeah. And other appointments, we better get back on track to agriculture. You were early in QMS. I think you were chairman there of QMS when it sort of first got going. Would you be? I know Jim Stober was instrumental in setting that up, but I think
gosh, that's a long time ago. And I forget, what was it before it was QMS?
Squabble.
That's when I was involved.
Okay, right.
Yeah, but I think QMS is a good organisation, and almost it ensures that the industry does what it should be doing anyway, and. Sometimes I sort of get a bit carried away, and I think that because I think QMS does so much good, that there shouldn't be any doubt about if you're a livestock keeper, you should statutorily be required to be a member of QMS. Yes, okay. But that's just my personal view.
Yes, okay. I think there's mixed opinions on that, but you're right, that's a general opinion. And you were director of the Cali Mart and UA, I think, not both at the same time, probably.
No, not both at the same time, thank goodness. No, but again, I enjoyed that. We introduced a number of new techniques and technologies, and it was all connected with agriculture, and therefore to me it was fascinating.
A fellow of the Royal Society, am I right in thinking?
Yes, for my sins.
Okay.
For my sins.
Excellent organisation as well.
Old age catching up me now, I'm afraid. So
you've been rewarded with a CBE, which is a fantastic achievement as well. But you have done a lot of things, John, and they're incredible. And I mentioned flippantly just now, but you were climbing a tree a few years ago and fell out of the tree, if I remember right, and hurt yourself. So you're still active anyway.
That shows how much intelligence I don't have. I went climbing a tree, which I should not have done, of course. And yes, you're right, fell out of the tree. And at the age I was at, I didn't have a lot of spare clothing, as it were. So. But I've recovered from that. Good. No, and you are still hands-on here on the farm. How many men do you? I saw a guy feeding the cattle there, but have you got 2 or 3 stockmen about? Yes, we've got men. Because, as I say, I'm still on one or two other interests, and therefore I have to be away, so I wouldn't commit myself to a 7-day-a-week job. No. But, I let the men off when the men need to get off.
Sure. Yeah,
I quite enjoy that.
What size of acreage is Balboothie, just out of interest?
Balboothie's about 400 acres.
Okay, I was going to say some good land here and some...
Just fine for an old man to look after.
There you go, that's your cottage garden compared to farming 37,000 acres or whatever it was we said earlier on there. Well, John, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. It's been, I know a lot of our listeners out there were looking forward to hearing what you had to say about various things, and I think we've had a good chat.
I've enjoyed talking to you. Brings my youth back to me.
There we go, we've had a great chat there today, and thanks for being on Top Lines and Tails. Thank you for listening to another episode of Top Lines and Tails, the nation's favourite livestock podcast. As always, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Harborough, for their continued support with this podcast. And our guest this week is another Harborough customer, of which there are plenty throughout the country. And obviously, we talked about bulls there, and the bull sale season maybe is just over, but there's no better time to start thinking about the next batch of bulls. And Harborough's Stockman's Choice range of pedigree bull feed is renowned for turning out bulls to their full potential and supporting health, immunity, fertility and longevity in quality stock there. So find out about Harborough's Stockman's Choice range of pedigree bull feed there, and go and ask about their newly competitive priced blends that they have. Get in touch with your local representative or visit one of their 21 stores across the country there and become a Harborough customer there and enhance your pedigree livestock breeding. You can look up Harbrough's wide range of nutritional products there on the internet, and of course their free nutritional advice and all other range of products that they do as well there. So go and look them up there, and while you're on the internet, don't forget to look at our Top Lines and Tails Facebook page and just follow and join in our Top Lines and Tails Facebook community, where you'll find photographs and various other things to back up this and previous episodes.